Welcome to another episode of Knowledge. Oh, sorry. I want
Cut.
cut. All right.
Restart it.
Welcome to another episode of Petty and Profound. I am a co-host, your co-host, Caitlin, with her brother Morgan.
That's
And
me.
today we are going to talk about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Morgan, would you like to hear a summary of this awesome movie?
I would, yes, thank you.
All right. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is an imaginative, emotionally resonant, romantic sci fi drama. That's a lot there. Directed by Michael Gondry, with a screenplay by Charlie Kaufman, based on a story by Kaufman, Gondry, and a friend, Pierre Bismuth. The film follows Joel, who is Jim Carrey, played by Jim Carrey, and Clementine, played by Kate Winslet. They are former lovers who undergo a procedure to erase each other from their memories. As Joel's memories of Clementine begin to vanish, he desperately fights to hold on to their moments together, leading to a poignant, non-linear exploration of love, loss, and memory. The film is celebrated for its visual inventiveness, heartfelt performances, and meditative tone.
I think
You
that's
like?
good. I think that's a very good summary.
Good summary. All right. So, Morgan, give me your first impressions of this movie. Came out in
Uh
2004.
let me veer off course. I want to share two things about the movie, which are my favorite parts, and they're kind of silly. They're kind of whimsical.
Okay.
I I was watching this time when I watched the movie. Obviously, I watched it a few times, and when it first came out years and years ago. But this time I was watching it with my son, and I was pop quizzing him on who some of the actors and actresses were. And one of
Okay.
my favorite ones, where there's kind of a lot. There's at least a couple superheroes in this one, or at least became much more famous later on. So like one of them, I was like, "Who's that actor?" It's Elijah Wood. He's like, I don't recognize him. I'm like, you don't recognize Frodo? From
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings? He's like, I see it now. And then the other one's like, Mark Ruffalo. I'm like,
Ruffalo.
freeze frame. Who is that? He's like, I've never seen that actor before. I'm like, you've never seen the Hulk? And so like this, and obviously, the first time I saw it, the Lord of the Rings and the Marvel universe were like
Didn't exist.
nowhere on my radar. But like this time when I was watching it, I just kept laughing to myself, like, oh, there's Frodo, there's Hulk. So
Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, and so like that's one silly observation. The other silly observation I'd have, because I think it's really easy with this movie to go deep, to go cerebral, to go really intellectual. But I like the silliness part of it. And the second the second observation I had is, I can't remember when in the movie this happened, but I think, Jim Carrey's like, I can't believe you'd have me erased, or she'd have me erased from her memory, and that sort of the comeback was, well, she's impulsive. It's just
You
like,
know,
that's, yeah,
that's
I was like,
me.
well, like if I had to sum up the movie in two lines, it's that sort of like the indignation of how could you possibly erase me? It's like, yeah, well, I'm impulsive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I like what there's so many great things about this movie. First, it is a romantic comedy, and as you and I have discussed in several of our previous reviews of movies, we feel that's kind of a dying art in today's movies. So that's one. And two, I mentioned it in the summary, but the cinematography of this movie is amazing. I actually read stuff like more articles on this movie than like any of the other movies we've reviewed, and I like that the director. really avoided almost all like CGI at all costs, if and when he could. So like that scene where they're in the beach house and it
And the
floods, they actually
water.
just got a
Yeah.
pump to pump in the ocean water into the house. Like they wanted, and all the lighting, it was all done with handheld cameras, and the director only wanted natural light, and so that's why it had that kind of gritty handheld
Yeah.
view.
It's like
And
35
it
millimeter. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so what it's visually stunning. It has a really good like the characters I think have really good chemistry, and it tells a really good romantic story. And then on top of that, it's a good what if movie. And so it's a concept movie that actually does the work of developing characters. And so like we said, The Terminator was absolutely a what if movie. What if robots or machines try to take over the world and end the human race? And then it was just a car chase for the rest of the movie. But this, the big question is, what if you could erase a memory, a person from your memory that's really unpleasant and painful? One, would you do it? And two, like, what are the consequences of erasing memory? And like, adding a fourth layer, it's like the title is based on that Alexander Pope poem, which is fantastic. So it's like so many awesome artistic layers, which is why I think this movie really turned out well. And then on top of that, a really great cast of Jim Carrey playing a straight man, the straight man, like similar with Truman Show, and then Kate Winslet, who was nominated, I believe, for Best Actress for this role. It's actually in an interview she said this was one of her favorite movies she's ever done. So yeah, I think it brings like four levels of greatness, making this a very enjoyable movie to watch and kind of a timeless movie too.
I'll throw in another fun fact, another whimsical fact. All the hair changes that
Yes,
Kate
oh, I have
Winslet
something on
did,
that.
those were wigs. Those were
They
not
were wigs.
actual. Yeah, so like that was, I think that was part of the fun for her, is I think she was able to try on different personalities, try on different
Hmm.
wigs. I
Hmm.
thought that was kind of fun.
I have that somewhere. It's sometimes I have too many notes that it's
Notes.
hard for me to find them. But the wig color was actually like a time that showed the timeline. Okay, here we go. Each hair color marked a different stage in Joel and Clementine's relationship. And so the movie, the reason she was actually willing to dye her hair, but it was shot out of chronological order. And so
Sure.
it would just be really impractical for her to dye her hair orange in the morning and then dye it blue in the afternoon over and over and over again. But in the beginning, green hair was new love. Red and orange, which was Kate Winslet's favorite, she said, conflict and passion. Blue was distance and cooling. And then faded blonde, endings and detachment. So that was pretty neat. Uh, so one thing I read was the film's concept came from an artist, Pierre Bismuth, which I mentioned. So, and he was a friend of the director, Michael Gondry. And he imagined he was talking to a female friend of his, and she was just going through a breakup. And she had said to him, I just wish I could wipe him from my memory. And then he thought this would be a great art project or a visual art project. And so he had conceived of the idea of sending postcards to people in the mail, just saying, hey, you've been erased, or so and so's been erased from, let's just say, Michel's memory. And he just wanted to see how people would react if postcards like that went out in the mail. And he ended up telling that to Gondry, and Gondry thought that was a really great idea. And so they just liked that idea so much, they're like, let's just make a screenplay about it. And so just from that one idea, he gets a writing credit and was like part of the award when it got its Oscar. Isn't that pretty cool?
I think it is cool. I think one of the things I read, I think this was about this one. It started to blur a little bit because we were doing so many of these movies and we're doing so much research. I think this particular idea or concept or screenplay, when it first started out, it was almost sort of like a test idea. Like almost it's sort of like a writing sample. Like it wasn't necessarily meant to turn into a movie. It was more
Really?
just to show, hey, I'm creative. Hey, I'm capable of coming up with kind of interesting stuff. And then I think it snowballed. But like that was one thing I read that I thought that was interesting. Like how many how many movies weren't intended to be movies?
Yeah. And then how many movies were intended to be movies and didn't? So it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, what's the Venn diagram look like, I guess? Just like when we saw Groundhog Day, that was a calling card
yeah,
screenplay, but never actually intended to be greenlit. And I
yeah.
guess, like it also, you always hear about certain movies sitting on a shelf for like a decade or more. And so that makes me wonder, like, how many amazing movies are out there that we'll never see, that were never made, or they were made and never released. So just probably a lot of really interesting ones that, again, society may be better or worse off for not seeing. Yeah. So what else? What else?
How I'm going to distract you, or I'm going to take us off course. How much, if at all, did you research the poem?
I
That
didn't research the poem a lot. I did not. Do tell.
So I did about roughly the smallest amount of research as
Okay.
possible.
Do
But it was
tell.
interesting because the movie is about yeah, as you mentioned, having your memories targeted, specifically targeted, so you can forget a specific person to sort of get over a relationship or a trauma. And the poem, talks about the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. It actually refers to a couple. I believe the poem was in the 1700s. But when they were talking about the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, they were actually talking about sort of sin, like avoiding sin or bad thoughts. So if you have, good thoughts and, you don't think about whatever that, and I think the person, that the poem was about was thinking perhaps about becoming a nun or something like that. So it's about having a spotless mind, which is interesting. Like the quotes work better than like the actual poem. But anyway, I just wanted to digress because I thought that was interesting that if you dig into the poem, it's actually kind of talking about a different spotless mind.
Sure. So, one thing I want to talk about is like characters and chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joel is clearly a quiet observer, and Clementine is kind of brings a chaotic energy. And oddly, they're
Sure.
kind of like the opposites attract
Yeah.
trope. Um, One thing I want to talk about, and I was so excited to see this and be reminded of it in a review. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if Morgan's ever heard of this concept. I would be shocked if you haven't, but maybe you haven't. Someone first shared this word or term with me in 2014, 2015. And so have you
Feel so
heard
much
of the
pressure.
term? Huh?
Feel so much pressure.
Yeah. Manic pixie dream girl.
No, I don't think I have.
Heard of manic pixie dream girl? I'm so
At
excited.
least
After
not
this,
in that form. There might be other synonyms or something
no,
else.
it is that is the term. It's so great. You should, if you Google it, you'll find this funny YouTube video of a girl, and I actually have a description of it. Uh, all right, I'll just go there first. So this is a quote from a review or an article about the movie. I think a decade later. At first glance, Clementine is a dead ringer for Nathan Rabin's definition of the now ubiquitous term, a bubbly, shallow, cinematic creature that exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life in its infinite mysteries and adventures. When she meets Carrie's Joel Barish, for what the audience eventually learns is the second time, she's a zany ball of energy, babbling on about ill advised names for hair dyes. In a matter of hours, she's teaching her very own broodingly soulful young man to embrace life, or at least the risk of falling through the ice on the Charles River. And she actually has a quote. And it's funny because it says, enter the mini speech that reads like a takedown of the sensitive writer directors Rabin wouldn't call out for another 3 years. And this is what she says in the movie. Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm going to make them alive, but I'm just an effed up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours. So, anyway, yeah, Manic Pixie Dream Girl. What's interesting, he wrote it about a movie which I never watched. I think Elizabethtown, that has Kirsten Dunst in it, but I think she plays a Manic Pixie Dream Girl in it. But there's this amazing YouTube video of a girl. She's just bubbly, and she's like, I go to the store and pay for everything with buttons, and like, so it's hilarious. Another movie that didn't age well due to the Manic Pixie Dream Girl theme is Garden State. Natalie Portman in Garden State is
The one
the
with the helmet.
epitome of the epitome of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl. She's gorgeous,
Yeah.
but she has that weird, like,
Zach Braff is the other one in that movie.
yes, yeah. She has all her hamsters and her weird, like, pet cemetery in the
Yeah.
backyard. And she's like, I just dancing in her
Right.
room. So she is, yeah, perfectly pure. Never really had a boyfriend. I don't know. Just again, just like a fever dream, a girl that doesn't exist. But I think Roger Ebert wrote a really amusing review about that movie, about how like that character just doesn't exist in real life, and it's just a fantasy. But Clementine definitely fits that mold, and so I was just so excited to see if you were aware of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl,
Yeah,
and just
I'm
discuss how
not.
Clementine
Yeah,
literally fits this mold.
I'm not.
So
I'm not surprised though. Like, I'm not. Even though we're sort of doing this YouTube, I wouldn't say I necessarily. I don't think I necessarily consume a lot of like uh, establishment critic kind of stuff. Establishment. This is what these concepts are. I'm not necessarily trying to. You know, like I'm as you know, I'm not the person who knows sort of like the catchy new thing that's going on, like the fads,
it's like 15 years
the
ago.
lingo.
It's
I don't
not
always
catchy.
have the lingo, and that's
No,
okay. It doesn't bother me.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I
Well,
I
I,
think
I
part
recommend now you know.
I think part of it too is in all those movies. It's sort of and the quote you had from Clementine, is sort of there's sort of like a fixation, and there's sort of like a fix me, kind of, and it's like, look, like that's although the term you threw out, although that might be sort of a concept character in real life, it doesn't exist. So
But I think it's totally fair. Like I can't think of s- a single romantic movie that doesn't have the concept where someone feels, or there's this vibe of like I need someone to complete me, or I've come alive now that I've met this new love. And so the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is just kind of a just distilling that down into like a cute artsy person that kind of fulfills that role. So I think most romance
well,
novels, most romantic plots have a, you were my missing piece element, but like the Pixie Dream Girl just adds like an artsy, goofy
yeah,
flair to it.
well,
But
I mean, part of the problem is, as you said, opposites attract. And when you have sort of like the brooding, depressing, kind of boring,
yeah,
male character, and in this case, it's Jim Carrey. Like you got to lighten that up, and it's like you got to lighten it up a lot. With a
yeah,
lot of spray paint and a lot of hair dye and a lot of zaniness and a lot of it's sort of like for each way that he's boring. You need to okay, well he dresses boring. Okay, well she can't dress that way. Or well he's pretty reserved in the way he talks, so she has to be in your face. He's his moods are kind of pretty down, so she has to have really high highs to sort of offset that. So I mean, it makes sense. Um, and I definitely recognized it. At least from the perspective of, oh, it's sort of a typical opposites attract crush, or oh, this is the crush that's going to bring, because you also have that, hey, how are you gonna give Jim Carrey a blow up? Or sorry, not a blow up, a glow up. Like, and also, what does that relationship look like? How do you give him a relationship where people want to watch? It's like, if it's similar, people
Two
attract,
boring
then
people.
it's gonna be him, and like that's gonna be a boring film. People are gonna turn that off in 5 minutes. There's gonna be
Sure.
no memory erasing. It's just gonna be a lot of anxiety and deep thoughts and hand wringing. It's
Yeah, I would say we've asked this question in some of our other reviews, but Kate Winslet's Clementine, she's definitely my favorite character in the movie because one, she just plays like she leans so fully into that character, and the character is just really fascinating. Again, I really like her potato people that she creates and dresses up. That's
yeah,
pretty funny. She is absolutely a volatile or even mercurial personality. um, what I think is funny is he ends up resenting her for the very things he fell in love with. You see these scenes where she's talking about wanting to have a baby, settle down, and he kind of is dismissive of her and it's like, "Do you even think you could take care of a baby?" He kind of sees her as a loose cannon, someone who's unreliable, unstable, and so he kind of holds that against her, and puts her down in some moments, at least in his mind. She's just gonna drink, she's gonna get stupid.
yeah.
uh
It's tough though, because it also, he likes her because she's carefree. But at the same point in time, she sometimes wants to be taken seriously, and it's tough because people aren't always only one thing. Like, you can be carefree in some contexts and then serious in other contexts. So I feel like Jim Carrey isn't being very fair with her, in those conversations. Yeah, I think he's probably being a little bit reductive. Uh, and honestly, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, look, if you're, you know, I think you told me this one time, but with relationships, they either maintain their intensity or go to sort of like the next level. It's very difficult to scale down the intensity without it falling apart, right? So you can't be like, oh, well, like, let's take each other less seriously, or let's stop talking about the future. Like, any type of that, sort of causes an unraveling. And I think Jim Carrey wasn't thinking two steps ahead. And I think I think that's why she decided, hey, time to end it. Um, and I guess one thing too is, I'm not sure if she didn't have her memories erased, I'm not sure they would have been capable of a fresh start. I think I think, as you noted, like, the hair colors, the seasons of their relationship had changed, going from sort of spring to summer to fall to winter. I'm not sure she would have been necessarily open to trying it again if they hadn't sort of had this experience, or the memories hadn't been erased.
Potentially. So in reading about like screenplay facts, first of all, there were lots of cuts to the final movie, and there were some characters that we never saw, and then there were some things about the characters that were never shared in the final movie. Are you aware of any of these? And if not, would you like me to share them?
I would like you to share them. I'm not aware of them.
Okay, so first of all, there are several times in the movie where Jim Carrey mentions his previous girlfriend,
Naomi.
Naomi. Yes, in the original movie, there were scenes with this previous girlfriend played by Ellen Pompeo, who is in Grey's Anatomy. Which also interesting. He met Clementine while he was still in a relationship with Naomi, Ellen Pompeo, but they cut out all of her scenes, and the only vestige of her in the actual movie is just on like a memory of a voice, like voicemail. And then secondly, Tracy Morgan was in the movie. He played Jim Carrey's neighbor, but they thought he was such a loud and kind of distracting character
He's
because
pretty
that's who he,
boisterous. Yeah.
yeah. And so they thought he really like kind of messed with the tone and the
Yeah,
pacing
stole
of
the
the
show
movie. So they,
probably. I mean,
yes,
I can see how he has a very commanding personality, and I could see people be
yes.
like, "Well, let's hear more about him. Why are we focusing only on these folks?"
Exactly. So he was cut from the movie completely. And then it was actually supposed to show that Jim Carrey, Joel, and Clementine slash Kate Winslet had their memory erased like 15 times. They were just
Oh,
like in this
really?
makeup
Like,
breakup
yeah.
cycle into their old age. And Kirsten Dunst is publishing like a memoir as an older woman. And she's like taught and like she meets with Joel and Clementine as old people who want to get their memory erased once more. So they cut that out because it was a lot of noise. And I think it actually made the movie better. It made it
Oh,
much
for
more
sure.
streamlined.
Yeah, more streamlined. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna
But
say,
oh, sorry.
I think of all that, any of that stuff had been in there, and certainly if all of that stuff had been in there, it would have just felt messier.
Yeah.
And also sort of like, what are you trying to say? Because I feel like right now, it's a pretty clean question, which is, as simple as personal growth. What's the best way to get there? Is it to sort of like deal with your own stuff, or would it be easier if you could press the reset button? Like, and I like that. I like that it's kind of laser focused and sort of like, what's the best way to move on? Forget it ever happened. Actually, forget it ever happened, or just kind of soldier through it.
Sure. Uh, I think I think the part of the movie that asks that question mm, at least more directly is the Kirsten Dunst character. And so she's kind of more of the B story in there. And so for anyone who hasn't seen the movie or doesn't remember, she works at the doctor's office that does the memory erasing. And I don't know how old she is when this movie was recorded. She's in her early 20s and she's the receptionist. And she clearly has kind of a puppy love crush on the doctor in his 50s. And so early in the movie, you think, oh, she's just kind of admiring him from afar, but it's very obvious that she just like puppy dog eyes. She just thinks the world of this doctor and, has feelings for him and kind of puts the moves on him. And it's a little messy, but it turns out the doctor reveals to her, oh, we can't do this again. And she's, what? What? And it turns out that they had had an affair. And he said, we thought it was for the best that we erase your memory. But of course, because she has her memory erased, she has no recollection of a messy affair where his wife found out and thus wanting to have her memory erased. So she's stuck in this loop of
Yeah.
always having feelings for this guy and never learning the lesson of how messy it is and kind of him exploiting her and taking advantage. Another thing I read is that in another version of the script, she gets pregnant and has an abortion. And that's really messy and decides that very painful, wants to like wash her whole memory of it. So ultimately, her disappointment in feeling bamboozled about having her memory being wiped and then everyone around her just pretending like it didn't happen, she feels, I don't know, how would you describe it? But ultimately, that makes her send out all the tapes at the end of the movie, all these previous memory erasing files to earlier clients and patients saying, here's your tape that you recorded before you had your memory erased. This is what you had erased. Ultimately, she thinks it's ethically wrong to erase people's memories. And so she sends out all the evidence of previous things being erased, which also is ethically dicey if you ask me. But that's the catalyst for her for doing so. But what do you think about that, Morgan?
Well, I mean, I guess first of all, definitely with the Kirsten Dunst situation, as you call it, the B character storyline. She's in a bit of a Groundhog Day situation where she's reliving the same mistakes, um, which is difficult, but also for her, it's really embarrassing. It's not just, and her embarrassment gets revealed in the sort of like the most you know um, painful or striking way possible. Both were, one, she doesn't even realize like that happened before with her boss, and then also the boss's wife confronts them all. And so it's very visceral, it's very noisy. Her embarrassment is very noisy, and it happens in front of pretty much all of her coworkers. So it's very loud, and emotional. Um, yeah, it's tough because I don't know how. Like she says, it's a moral thing, but I don't know if it's that or if it's just regret and embarrassment. If she's just trying to say, hey, you maybe she's trying to save people from embarrassment or her regrets. Because the problem is, it does this procedure, getting rid of your memories. It does, it's sort of like, history repeating itself. It's like, what's that quote? Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. And I think that's actually sort of the morality that she's talking about, is you're just going to keep making the same mistakes over and over again, and I feel bad for you because I feel bad for myself. Um, I think that's kind of what she's saying, or at least that's how I interpreted it. But yeah, it's super weird. I mean, the pendulum for her swung completely the other way, and then at the end of the movie, she's doing like mass mailings to everyone,
Yes. She's
which
outing it all. Yeah.
I'm not sure that's, I mean,
Is
like
that
the
the
most
solution?
ethical either. Not only
Yeah,
that, like, does
yeah.
everyone get a refund then? Because
Yeah, she destroys the business. But also it's like, yeah, there's so many, it's like, one, those files should have been a lot more locked down. But that doctor's office was a little janky in the first place. There are a lot of
yeah,
questions. I don't
it
know.
is not yeah, it was pretty.
It's not high
Seemed like
tech.
it was on a pretty shoestring budget.
Hmm. Hmm. Another ethically questionable, not even questionable, totally unethical uh subplot is the Elijah Wood character, right?
Yeah,
And so he plays a complete creep in the movie. He reveals early on into the movie that when they were erasing Clementine's memory of Joel, that he developed a crush on Clementine. Not only did he develop a crush, but he steals a pair of her underwear when they're in her apartment, and he shares that, which super creep. But then taking it to a whole nother level, he takes ephemera from Joel and Clementine's relationship, love letters, pictures that Clementine drew, etc., even a present that Joel was going to give Clementine. And he basically just decides to superimpose himself, or basically embody Joel and say things to Clementine that Joel said. So Clementine, for example, invites him to go lay on this ice lake that she really likes to visit. And he remembers that Joel said something very touching to her while they were laying on that lake, something about, I'm so happy I could just die. And he basically parrots those actions and those words to Clementine, basically to win her affection. What I love, though, is even though Clementine has ostensibly had her memory wiped of Joel and the words that he said to her, instinctively it feels false and phony to her, and she's very creeped out by it. And so, and this is something that I think the film hints at too, is even if you erase your memory, th- not everything is erased. There's something subconscious that you know when things feel right or feel familiar, and you know when they don't. And so when Elijah Wood is trying to pretend to be Joel or act like Joel, she knows it's insincere and inauthentic, and it just really creeps her out. Uh, similarly, at the beginning of the movie, Joel and Clementine ostensibly don't know each other, but they are immediately drawn to each other, immediately comfortable with each other, and go 0 to 60 in like 30 seconds upon meeting each other. And by the end of the day, they're like, hey, I'm just going to go crash at your house. So, what are your thoughts on that, Morgan?
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts. I mean, for any system or um, situation, people are going to try to hack it, right? As we talked about with Groundhog Day, he's trying to hack into different friendships, different relationships. Certainly, his love interest. He's trying to figure out, what she likes to read and what she like, her favorite drink, things like that. Um, and it works for some people and it doesn't work with others. And when in the movie the Elijah Wood character reads Joel's journal and tries to figure out sort of how to court, it's reassuring that, I don't know if it's she knows it's false because she has sort of deep-seated memories and she knows that those memories are with someone else, or whether it's just it doesn't fit Elijah Wood's personality. It could also just be false because the messenger isn't genuine. He has a different personality. I mean, some people, you know, just because they use the same words, it doesn't mean they're able to imbue them with the same meaning, or it doesn't come off the same way. So it's reassuring. It is also I like your comment that, even after the procedure where they both had their brains zapped, they become fast friends. They're instantly drawn. There's certain types of electricity. There's certain types of, you
Vibes.
know, styles and, personalities that people are attracted to. Like magnets. There's a certain magnetism, and sometimes it's innate. Um, and it's nice. I mean, it's kind of, on the one hand, you're like, oh, they'll find their way. They'll keep finding their way back to each other, and then part of you is like, but will they keep finding their way back to the same arguments too? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I think that's a fascinating thing about the movie. And I actually think they did it's a breakup. It's actually a breakup movie, and it's actually one of the more enjoyable breakup movies I've seen. Did you ever see that Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Aniston breakup movie? I don't know when it came out, like
I think it's
2010,
called The
2009.
Breakup.
Yeah, it's terrible. Like, I felt like I was in a breakup in that entire movie, and it was viscerally awful. Like, one, it wasn't a good movie, and two, it was just like, yeah, I feel like crap watching this movie. But,
Yeah.
like, this is a breakup movie where it actually had interesting things to say. Like, one of my favorite quotes in this movie, and I've thought about it a lot, is when Jim Carrey is sitting with Kate Winslet in a restaurant, and they have nothing left to say to each other, and he says he's thinking, he's like, he's looking at this other couple that's just quietly eating. He's like, are we going to become the dining dead just
Uh,
like those people? And to this day, I will sit in a restaurant and you see a couple just looking at their phones, not talking, and I think
I
dining dead. I think of
I
dining dead.
wanted I wanted the other couple to like look up and be like us. Are you talking about?
Yeah.
We can hear you. Like
Yes.
I
Yes.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know.
So
I mean, you're right that it's a breakup movie, and the
yes,
feelings are so raw. The
very raw.
feelings from both Clementine and Joel. You can, with both of them, because they're so different, you can actually see their perspective. And you're like, well, do you guys offset each other? Do you balance each other out, or do you just drive each other crazy? And I think it's probably both. It's like,
Well, it's that whole thin line between
yeah,
love and hate, right? Yeah.
and
Another comment he said, she's talking to him in bed, and she's like, talk to me, tell me your thoughts, and he's like, constantly talking isn't communicating, which another interesting line. And she's like, that was really hurtful. And it is a hurtful thing to say, but
uh,
another really good line. And so the dining dead and the constantly talking isn't communicating. Like those are insightful comments or insightful thoughts about the demise of a relationship. But again, the breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn, clearly not meant to be the same artistic vibe, but it has, at least it's trying to think about what makes relationships stay together versus fall apart. Whereas in the
Well,
breakup, Vince Vaughn was just kind of a jerk
the
and
nice,
inconsiderate. And
the
granted,
nice,
Jim Carrey was a jerk several times, and sometimes Kate Winslet. But again, they were at least complicated, unique characters that made sense to me. Whereas in other
this,
movies, people are just caricatures.
the the satisfying thing about this movie and their relationship is that there's a real philosophical struggle. It's like, I want to be carefree, and it's like, no, we have to be super serious. With most couples, it's not necessarily this cataclysmic argument of philosophies. Usually it's like, do we want to get this sofa? Do I like these curtains? Should we go to on vacation to Colorado or Arizona? It's like most fights and most disagreements are like, no, I like this house better, or I think I think we should have the kids play soccer, not tennis. It's a lot of things that are in the gray. With this stuff, it's like, wow, they're really, there's a lot of distance between their personalities, and when they're fighting, you feel like the distance is cavernous. Um, and I don't know, and you pick different sides depending on the argument. You're like, wow, he's really depressing today, or oh, sometimes you do want to be quiet. Like sometimes you need to have some quiet time or some downtime. I get that. Everyone gets that. It's like depending on which argument you actually relate with different characters. So I like it because you don't you you actually feel a little bit more. You root for them a little bit, in the sense that they're so far apart that you hope they can figure it out. But again, like you were saying, the Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston, you're like, I don't know, man. I got nothing to
I'm
I
not
got
rooting
nothing to
for this
offer.
couple.
What's that?
Yeah. I said I'm not rooting for this couple in the breakup with Jennifer Aniston and Vince
Sure.
Vaughn.
Yeah.
Uh, what else was I going to mention? So I read this article, and this lady was talking about loss. And this movie is also about loss. And so generally people who come to that doctor wanting to have their memory erased is because they experienced something painful, they lost something, they were hurt, and in order to erase that hurt, they erase all of the memories, which also, as the author of this article is arguing, that's a loss in and of itself, and that's something that Jim Carrey realizes too late when he's having his memories depleted, and he's reliving these moments with Kate Winslet, and he's like, wow, this was a really special thing that we shared. I loved this memory, and I don't want to lose that. And so ironically, people approach this doctor wanting to have their memories erased to get rid of pain and get rid of loss, but in doing so they get another loss, and they lose knowledge, like we've talked about with Kirsten Dunst, so they might make the same mistakes again, but they also lose memories of really positive experiences. And so, yes, there are arguments for like soldiers with PTSD. That's probably stuff you might not want to remember. But arguably, a lot of these people are losing things that were really valuable to them, or memories that meant a lot to them, but just to get away from the momentary or temporary pain of having lost love or any other positive experience or role in their life.
Yeah. I think I think also I think there's also fear and shame. Because one of the things Jim Carrey's grappling with is sort of fear of being alone. But then a lot of shame. I don't is sort of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like it's sort of vanilla and boring as he is, I don't think he likes himself. I think he's caring. Like, even when he's saying stuff, I don't think I think he wishes he was a better person. I think he wishes he could be more spontaneous. I think he wishes he could let things go. I think he could. He wishes he could be more fun. It's just and I think he has a lot of shame in that. Um, and I think the sort of flip side of the coin is I think Clementine has a lot of you know fear and shame about not being taken more seriously, about not being trusted. And like I think I think this procedure is attempting to try to allay those fears and that shame. But you're right that you're throwing out the good with the bad. You're deleting good memories and foundational memories sometimes along with negative ones and things you're trying to get past. I know we already talked about the Alexander Pope quote, but there's also a Nietzsche quote. Do you remember the Nietzsche quote? It's also Kirsten Dunst says it too, right in the same scene as she does the Alexander Pope one. But it's like, "Blessed are the forgetful, for they even get the better of their blunders," or something like that. But like if you dive into the Nietzsche quote, it again gets into the concept of for self improvement. It's There's a tension. If you're constantly held down or held back by all of your previous mistakes, you're never going to be able to move forward. So in order to grow and in order to move on, you have to forget some of your past. But in order to move on and in order to grow, you also have to remember some of your past. So it's really about balance. The Nietzsche quote is all about balance. And I think the movie is I actually like this quote better than the Alexander Pope quote because this one says, like, look, you really got to balance it. You don't want to you're never going to have all good, like, and the only way you're going to be able to build is sort of an acceptance, accepting yourself, accepting your past, but then courageously still moving forward.
Yes. One scene I really like, apropos of nothing, is in the doctor's office. Everyone you're supposed to bring like trinkets or, journals, anything that are things that you want need to get rid of once you wipe a memory clean, but also helping them identify in your brain where those memories are associated. And there's at the office, like a traditional doctor's office, when you're like sitting in there and you wonder, like, what's this person here for? Right? There's the lady with her box. Do you remember the doctor's office, the people there? So she has her box, and it's like you see a dog bowl, you see like a rawhide bone, and the bowl says Buster on it. And so it's like very clear that she's sad about a lost pet. And then there's a guy to the right of her with his box, and you see like a sports trophy coming out, and so like kind of like a Mr. Destiny. Who knows? Like he missed that important shot, but like it is interesting just to imagine, again, what do people come in there with? Like what's in those boxes? And if this were real, what kind of people would show up? And one last thing, I read in an article something like 10, 15 years ago, they did an experiment with rats and they were able to do this. So they were able to like zap little parts of their brain and like erase memories or reassociate positive memories with negative ones. So like imagine a rat like goes to the end of the cage to get some cheese and it gets buzzed. Ow, that really hurts. And so they avoid that area where it gets shocked. But they could like tweak its brain so it's like, oh, when I go over there, it's really positive. And so they say the technology is actually there to do it, or at least to try with humans. Of
Yeah,
course, they haven't yet, but it is kind of crazy that it's potentially possible.
I think it's terrifying. That does not make
Totally
me feel
terrifying.
better.
I
That
mean,
does not
yeah,
make me feel better.
it wasn't meant to make you feel better. All right, so let's wrap it up because we're doing a double header tonight, Morgan. We're going to do
I
a
know.
second recording after this. But before we do, I wanted to talk about Rotten Tomatoes. Did you
Okay.
see Rotten Tomato scores?
I did not peek at Rotten Tomato scores.
Okay. What do you think critics were and what do you think audience was?
I think critics were higher on it and audiences were lower.
Wrong.
Okay.
But ever so slightly. Ever so slightly.
Oh, so they're basically the same.
Basically the same.
Yeah. Because this is a very intellectual movie, and usually with intellectual movies, critics tend to be a little bit
Critics can gobble
more
that up. Gobble it
bullish.
up.
And okay. So let's hear it. What are the percentages?
Critics, 92%.
Pretty high.
Audience, 94%.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say
Mhm.
it's about a 9 out of 10. I'd give it, like, if it were me, I'd give it like a 91%.
Well, all right. What was the budget? Do you have any guesses? You said you've gotten good at this now, so I want to see.
I did, and then for our next movie, I peaked and I was way off. So
Okay.
it shattered my confidence. I'm gonna go 15 million.
Not bad. 20. Worldwide gross.
40.
72. About 72. So it made a
Okay.
profit. Not
Yeah.
bad. Not bad. And so it was nominated. I think Kate Winslet was nominated, and the screenplay was nominated, and it won the Oscar for Best Screenplay.
Yeah, I was gonna say you tend to like movies that win best screenplay. Like we could probably, if we just did like selected our movie based on who won the Oscar for best screenplay, that would like, and we do that for 20 years, you'd probably like all of those films.
I probably would. I probably would. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I had some other things. Oh, some quick stuff before we.
Okay.
Okay, so the screenwriter. I can't believe I didn't mention this before. Charlie Kaufman. Wow, such a prolific screenwriter. Did also another one of my favorite movies of all time, Being John Malkovich.
Sure.
Definitely had the Being John Malkovich vibe. Actually, in the original screenplay, he had the doctor's office in that same Being John Malkovich building. They couldn't do with the filming, but like
Sure.
definitely has the same vibe. He also did Adaptation, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, and he did Anomalisa, which we've discussed previously
Yeah.
and you haven't seen. But yeah, definitely similar vibes. Oh, I don't know if you ever saw this movie. It was on Netflix and it was a big hit during the pandemic. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Did you ever see that? Oh, that's too bad. Too bad. All right. So that's a wrap for
That's a
Eternal
wrap.
Sunshine. Like and subscribe. I've been forgetting to say that. And then our next movie review, what are we going to be reviewing, Morgan?
Like this upcoming one, the one we're doing, the double header
Yeah.
on. I think we're
Yes.
doing Lost in Translation.
Yes, we are. All right. So, and sing.